Hello and welcome to the Career Change Diaries with me, Alice Stapleton. And today it's an absolute pleasure to speak to a previous client of mine, Hannah Gregory. Hi Anna, how are you?
Yeah, very well, thanks. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, well, thanks for joining us. So Hannah and we worked together back in 2022. So it's quite crazy to think all of that time has gone by. So it's really nice to catch up again. So to give you a bit of background on Hannah, so she originally worked for a fashion magazine publisher, doing advertising sales, and then moved from there to a business and finance weekly newspaper doing brand partnerships. And off the back of us working together, she then moved to join a startup dedicated to empowering women businesses and female entrepreneurs, and that was in a strategic partnerships role. So what I'm quite looking forward to is giving listeners a representation of somebody who perhaps doesn't go on to have a massive shift. So I'm always conscious that a lot of my episodes are, from, I don't know, nurse to baker, or people start their own businesses and that sort of thing. So yeah, it'd be quite interesting to see where you're at with things now and how it all materialized. So first of all, Hannah, tell us a little bit about what you were doing when we first started working together back in, I suppose we started in 2021, having looked at my records.
Yeah, sure, quite a lot's happened since then. Um,
Yeah.
Charles now included. Yeah, so I'm
Yeah.
currently on maternity leave now, which I think is a huge career shift in itself. Any parents out there listening, and I think something that you're never prepared for. So very much learning on the job for that one. But
Indeed, yes.
but yeah, going back to when we spoke, Alice, I sort of started my career fresh out of uni in publishing. I worked for a fashion publishers that owned about 13 titles, all kind of within the luxury and interiors sector. I worked in their advertising sales department, working with numerous brands who essentially want to advertise to the audience that we deliver our magazine to. I was there for about 4 years with numerous promotions in between. And it was a brilliant sort of learning curve straight out of university, meeting different clients, understanding how, I guess, an office environment really works, and all the
Mm,
structures that are sort of included in that. But yeah, it wasn't exactly the easiest environment I was coming into. I think magazines were and still are having a really tough time in terms of readership, audience. There's obviously this huge shift onto digital, and even more so now with AI. So there's huge transformation that sort of happened in the time that I was there. Readership numbers were sort of falling. We were trying to get everything from a magazine online. So I think a lot of businesses within that industry and sector were really at this inflection point of sort of losing revenue in the magazine sector, but trying to get digital and online sort of up and going. So when I was there, I actually went through redundancy rounds, which was obviously quite challenging, not a particularly
mm.
happy place to be working. And my housemate at the time, I lived with a colleague. We actually had to interview kind of against each other for two job roles that were going within a team. I think the
Oh
next day we were going
no.
on holiday together, and we were thinking, this is going to be awful if only one of us got it. Thankfully, both of us ended up securing our jobs. But I think that was a position I was thinking, I don't think I want to be in this ever again.
Yeah.
So
Well, and can you remember when you left uni? Is that what you wanted to do?
So yeah,
Was that
university I
intentional?
did art history, and I actually did my dissertation all in advertising in the 1950s. Sort of
Oh
looking
right.
at it from I guess, a feminist angle. Obviously, sort of the way women were portrayed within the 1950s in adverts wasn't exactly an amazing angle. So it was really looking at it through that lens. which I think loops into kind of later what I end up doing after you and me had our conversations. But yeah, advertising was what I was sort of interested in. I did some work experience in an advertising agency, which are elements of it I liked, but I didn't love being the agency side. I didn't love being the middleman dealing with a client and then dealing with other clients on both sides. So it was kind of good to understand I like this industry, but I don't want to be in an agency, which was then when I realized you could do sort of advertising within a publishing world. So yeah, that's how I sort of ended up at that job initially.
Yeah.
Um,
So what then made you move from that to the business and finance
yeah, so I think
world?
when those redundancies were
It's a bit of
happening,
a
I felt
shift.
I needed to sort of get out of that industry, and I actually thought I wanted to do something more creative. So started an interior design course alongside. So every Tuesday I went to Westminster Uni from sort of 6 till 9 to do an interior design diploma, thinking maybe that's my calling. It was fascinating, but I think I then realised there's a lot more to it than I initially thought. It's a lot more than painting and chucking a few scatter cushions on a on a sofa. Yeah, I really enjoyed the course, but then I felt I didn't want to go completely back to stage one and start as an interior designer and have to work my way up. I think financially also it didn't look like it would necessarily be the route that I wanted to go down or would support me for that time. So I actually left that business with no job to go to, which is a huge risk and not something I'd necessarily recommend to everyone. But for me, I needed to do it. I needed to have sort of clarity on what was the next stage. And I almost needed that time and space away from the business, which became sort of rather toxic towards the end,
Right.
to really actually think what I want to do. And meanwhile, I was still carrying on with that interior design diploma, so that was actually quite full on. And then I happened to bump into, in a boxing class of all places, a girl who I used to work with at the company previously, and she'd moved to a finance and business newspaper, weekly newspaper, and she was moving to the US with her role. So her role was actually free in the UK. So I spoke to her about it and thought, actually, that sounds quite interesting. My family are all within the finance space, dad, private equity, sister, sort of banking. So I've always been kind of around that. So I thought, actually, I want to hear a bit more about what this job role entails. So yeah, I went for a couple of coffees and then an interview, and eventually got the job. So it was still within obviously the publishing world, which I think beforehand I was quite keen to get out of, but it was a completely different kettle of fish. And actually, in terms of the brand, it was doing pretty well at the time. Readership numbers were high. They had an app. They had all this sort of online or online digital opportunities there. And it was challenging. It was something that I wasn't familiar with. And you're working alongside really smart people, which I loved. And also it was sort of more of a equal divided male female, which was also something different in the workspace that I hadn't had previously. So yeah, I moved to their brand partnerships team where I looked after finance and tech clients, managing sort of anything from sort of research to digital to marketing campaigns. And I was there for about 4 years. So I did those lovely COVID years also in this in that job role, which I know was really challenging for many people. I think particularly anyone dealing with brands and marketing spends, it was a really tough time. So I think that's
Yeah, it
post
was a
that,
sort
that's
of
when we had that conversation, you and me.
right. And having gone from advertising sales to brand partnerships, was there quite a bit of overlap in the skill set there, or did it feel
Yeah, guess
quite
brand
different?
partnerships
Or
is much more collaborative and more creative actually. At the place that I was working when you and me spoke, we had sort of numerous teams. So you would get a brief in from a client, you would then pitch it into a creative team, you'd then work with them on that idea, come up with a proposal and pitch it back. So there's a bit more to it, I think, than just straight sales. It was that sort of creative element I was sort of interested in and wanted to look at a bit more.
okay, that's quite interesting just to understand the differences. And how did it feel changing industry?
Yeah, it was good. I loved the challenge and I loved the different creative people that I worked with. The brand attracts really kind of inquisitive and interesting characters. So I think the team culture when I initially joined was brilliant and something that I was really looking for. I also liked
Mm.
working with different clients, the tech and finance. I really had to get to grips with everything within the kind of finance world. So that was completely fresh learning for me, which I think I was sort of missing in my previous role when I was sort of more in that sort of
Right.
fashion interiors world. Um,
Mm.
so yeah, it was a good challenge and something that I was really pleased I did.
Okay, good. So then what was it that started to niggle at you that prompted you to then start looking for a coach?
Yeah, I
Can
think
you
it
remember?
was. Well, I think we went obviously through the COVID years when the business was in not a great place. Everything was very sort of stagnant. There were a couple of redundancies as well. I mean, I know a lot of people went through a similar thing, but I think it made me step back and think, actually, where do I want to be now? Is this really ticking all boxes? And I think also the culture changed quite dramatically. We weren't required to go in as often, and that I just felt really sort of demotivated working at home. And I needed that sort of face to face interaction with clients and also colleagues. I think also the lack of autonomy, as I sort of mentioned a bit previously, the way it works, there's lots of internal teams, which is amazing in these huge companies that you have so much additional support. But I think I felt actually my role was becoming quite small. And I didn't have control over seeing something from start to finish. I didn't have complete kind of autonomy and creativity over what we were doing. And I wasn't necessarily growing within that particular role. So I think that's what I sort of realised. It was actually incidentally my mum that found you, Alice, because I think she saw you talk on the news, and I was saying I was looking for a coach. I
Uh,
was like, perfect. Yeah,
ta-da!
you turned up.
Uh, okay. And I imagine so a lot of people that decide to work with a coach, it's because they maybe feel like they're a bit of a crossroads or they don't really know what it is that they want to do next. Or can you remember what it was for you and what you were hoping to get out of
Yeah,
the
I think I was,
experience?
I'd done a bit of a shift in terms of went to a different, I guess, a different brand, but I was still within that publishing world, which when I left the previous job, I was trying to sort of get out of, and I sort of slipped back into it. And I think it's very easy to do that. And also with LinkedIn, with algorithms, you kind of just get given the same jobs. And I was like, I could easily go to another well, not easily, but I could do a lateral move to another title if I wanted to, but I was sort of stuck in this hamster wheel of not knowing how to get out or actually losing confidence in what was I good at and what were my values and what was kind of the purpose of all of this really. And I think I needed to really drill into that a little bit more rather than just browsing LinkedIn and thinking that looks great, I'll hop onto that. You spend a third of your life at work, and I think it's really important. You've got to either do something that you're really passionate about, or something that financially actually helps you live the life that you want to live.
Yeah, very true. Um, so looking, I suppose, just to work with somebody to get that clarity about what you wanted,
Mm,
sounds like it was helpful just to sort of step back a little bit and reassess so that
definitely.
your next move was fairly intentional rather than just going for what was in front of you
Yeah, exactly. And
at the
also sort
time.
of to interrogate a little bit more, to self-reflect. I think that's
Mm.
one of the key things that came out of working with you or perhaps anyone listening, a coach. It's that ability to actually really think, what do you want? Rather than trying to fit into a box that either your family's put around you or your friends have put around you. I think, when we're younger, we say these incredible things that we want to be and there's no inhibitions and you're so confident. But then as you get older, those doors start closing, but no,
Mm.
you can very much open them up again. So I think it's about, taking the time to really step back and interrogate what you want in more detail rather than just going down a path that you feel slightly forced into.
No, definitely. Yeah, I sometimes wonder why we close those doors on
Mm,
ourselves. I don't know. I remember doing a bit of PR work, and it was off the back of some research that said um, that the most popular career as a kid was being a police officer. But then I don't know, something crazy like 95% of people then didn't go on to be, not have that career.
Yeah.
Not it's like, I don't know, it's like we have this sort of perception of reality, or
Yeah,
maybe it's
absolutely. I think I did one of those tests a while ago at school and I got told I was going to be a firefighter. So maybe that's still my calling. Who knows?
yeah, maybe the next career, Hannah,
Yeah.
definitely. um okay, so we start working together. Can you remember, I suppose, some of the key learnings for you that really helped you decide what you thought was going to be best for you going forward?
Yeah, I think some of the work that we did, I remember we did that, not entirely sure what you call it, that star, which sort of looks at kind of your life purpose, values, beliefs, which was really helpful to sort of put that in a box and find out, what was the most important to me at that time. I think actually doing that exercise as you go through your career, it doesn't just have to be a, one time opportunity to do that. I might even do that sort of after my maternity leave, but I think it's really good to see where you're at and what your priorities are at that stage. I also remember we did, I don't want to give away all your secrets in case you're going to sign more clients up. But one thing that always really stuck with me, and I always think about, is what would people say about you at your funeral? I was like, God, that's quite a odd thought, but actually, it really makes you think. Is there a legacy you want to leave? What have you done with your life, rather than just sort of going through the day to day and looking forward to the weekend. What do you
Hmm.
want to leave? Do you want to help people? Do you want to make your millions and starting up a company? It was really helpful to actually take that step back and think what I wanted. And I think from the work that we did, it was clear that I wanted more autonomy in the role that I was doing. I wanted more creativity to be a part of whatever job it was I was doing at that time. And I really wanted to sort of manage projects from start to finish, which when you're working in big corporations, which I had done for the past 8 years, you don't necessarily do that. Yes, you get lots of other opportunities and working with teams, but I think I really wanted to see something get delivered from start to finish and also do something with real purpose, which is what, sort of led me on to do the next job that I did.
And with that purpose topic and that sense of legacy, can you remember what it was for you that was important, sort of more broadly?
Yeah, I think seeing the effect that your business had on people. I think when again you're working for big corporations and I'm dealing with huge readerships, you think actually who's reading this? Who's seeing this? You don't actually engage with those people because it's so vast. Whereas I think when you work in a smaller company, you actually speak to people, and you see the change you're having on someone's life. And I think
Mm.
that's what I was getting slightly lost in, with the brands before. I was sort of like, what is this all for? Whereas, the company that I now work for, you really have that, you see that tangibility in helping, women in the workplace and particularly female founders, which is, the area that I'm now sort of in.
Yeah. Well, and I remember that one of the options that we discussed in the program was you having your own thing and it being quite creative and fashion orientated.
Yeah.
So can you remember how did you tie that idea to some of what you uncovered
Yes, I
in the
think when
coaching?
we spoke and we did this whole sort of blue sky thinking, it was, purpose, creativity, and autonomy were the kind of the main things that came out of it that I lacked in the current role that I wanted in something in the future. I've always, been very interested in fashion, and I wanted to start a silk jumpsuit business when we were speaking, which is a route I sort of went down, partly. Um, but at the same time, in my, I guess, personal life, my husband was also setting up his own business. We were getting married that year. So there was quite a lot going on at the time. So I sort of went down the route of looking at setting up my own business. I did a fashion course alongside when I was still working at my previous role in the publishers. I then was able to sort of set up a business plan, got a couple of samples made. So it was sort of going down that route.
Mm.
But at the same time, I wasn't closing off any doors to other jobs that were out there. You know, I was still looking at LinkedIn, still having coffees with people, seeing what was out there, because I think me and my husband spoke about it at the time, and it made, well, from my view, it sort of made sense for, you know, him to really get his business off the ground. We've got that stability, see how that goes, and I can carry on, you know, my business ideas alongside a sort of day-to-day job, which is the route we eventually went down. So I think it's also important when you're looking at career changes. Yes, it's just you, but if you've got a partner, family, it's also really key to think about, you know, what they're all doing. It's very easy for someone to say, "Oh, just go for it," but you can get some really unsolicited advice from people who don't know anything about your financial state, who don't know anything about your personal life, and you listen to very sort of uplifting podcasts, and you know, you see LinkedIn posts talking about how amazing it was to start a business from scratch. But I think you do really need to think about, is that suited for you at that time, and
Mm.
whether you're sort of willing to take that risk. And I think for me personally, I wasn't willing to jump sort of headfirst into that at that time. But it was a great exercise to sort of start doing it alongside the role that I'm now in.
Well, yeah, because I do remember us having conversations about the sort of crossover between you wanting to start your own thing and having a role for obviously the startup that's there to support female entrepreneurs and you know doing so much in that space. It felt like it was going to be a sort of very relevant experience if you did decide to really push your own thing
Yeah,
beyond that, perhaps.
yeah, absolutely.
Um, so when you were applying for that job, um, I suppose you had the transferable skill set of brand partnerships. How did you I suppose, how did you sell yourself? Because obviously it's a very different industry. Can you remember having to talk a bit about how you could transfer your experience or, you know, the differences in industries or anything like that? Or were they
Yeah.
pretty open to your background?
No, it was I guess the transferable skills that I did have in terms of working sort of with finance clients, tech clients before, was if I was doing more to support women in the startup space, we did sort of pitch days at the company that I'm working for now. So having an understanding of, I guess, that financial landscape, what the issues are with, you know, women setting up businesses in terms of getting equity into their businesses. That was actually really
Okay.
helpful, and I was able to actually, you know, work and bring on a few finance and tech clients that I worked with to support us doing these programs at that company. So I think it was helpful in terms of the clients I was already in contact with. I was able to transfer some of those relationships over. Yes, they might be slightly different teams we're dealing with, but I sort of had an in. And I
Mm.
think, yeah, an understanding of the finance and tech landscape was particularly helpful in you know, working with some of these startups.
Okay, well, that's interesting. It's funny how, you know, sometimes to the outside eye, it can look like, you know, a very different space, but
Yeah,
there's always some tie over somehow.
yeah.
And was that just a job you saw on
Yeah,
LinkedIn, or was it
so
through a
interestingly, my
contact? Or
first ever role I did in the publishing world, it was actually set up by the female CEO of my first ever company I worked for. So I saw her set up this business, and I saw they did these incredible pitch days for founders, and I was like, what an amazing idea. You know, only 2% of VC funding goes to female founders, which is horrendous. So I thought, what, that's such a wonderful thing this business is trying to do. And it's more than
mm,
that. It sort of supports women more generally in the workplace, helping them kind of, you know, climb that career ladder. So yeah, I was always had my eye on this business, but it was obviously very small when it first started. And it was only as it started growing, there were more job opportunities there, and a job role came up that actually wasn't what I ended up doing at all. But I applied for it, and when I got on a call with the interviewer, we spoke in more detail, and she realised I had sort of brand partnerships background, and said, actually, I think that would be better for this more of a brand partnerships role in the business. So yeah, it was an amazing kind of coincidence, and I guess yeah, luck that that role that I was more suited in, they sort of had available. So I guess a lesson from that is if you
Yeah.
see a role that you think's not quite appropriate, it's definitely worth getting on a call with someone and understanding if there's more opportunities in that business. So yeah, she essentially carved out a new role for me.
Yeah. Oh no, that's great to hear. Yeah, I'm always encouraging people if you're in love with the company or the brand or whatever, then yeah, just trying to get a foot in the door somehow can always be really helpful. Um, and how did you find starting that role then? Can you remember what it
Yeah,
was like to
it
start
was full
with?
on, I think, but that's sort of what I wanted, the autonomy. There were no
Yeah.
structures in place in terms of, it's a startup environment. So if you've got an idea, come up with the idea, pitch it internally and get going with it, really. So I definitely felt like I was sort of thrown in the deep end. It was also my wedding, I think, the month I joined. So there was kind of a lot going on there. But it was the best way to learn. And actually, I kind of loved the idea that if you've got something you want to say or pitch, the business is really open to hearing about it. And it really helped me build in confidence, which I think I really lacked in the previous role in a big corporation. I almost needed to be in that sort of smaller environment that, builds you up. So yeah, it was a steep learning curve, but something I'm, grateful for having the opportunity to do. I
Mm.
volunteered for many more things internally than I think I would have done previously, and I was able to build out sort of programs and partnership opportunities that the business had never done before. So, in terms of having that, seeing something from start to finish, that I was really able to sort of own a project. There were very minimal internal teams. I think we only had one delivery team, so you're really doing anything from speaking to the client, coming up with the idea, creating the presentation PowerPoint, pitching it back, then delivering it with the support of the delivery executive. So you're doing the whole thing, and you're seeing the impact it has on women, which again is amazing to have testimonials from people about how you're supporting them within their careers or their businesses.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and I think you mentioned to me that is that sort of how you got involved with the girls' network as well, or
Yes.
was that something a bit
Yeah, the Girls
different?
Network, yeah, our business is familiar with it, but that was something I actually thought to do sort of separately. So it's working with underprivileged girls around London. And I live in North London, so I mentored a girl there at a school, which was yeah, it was amazing to do. She's only 14, doing GCSEs, but it was so yeah, I guess empowering to see how you can support someone who has no idea what they want to do in their life to after, about 15 sessions, they seem to have much more of a clear idea and a building in confidence and volunteering for stuff in school, putting their hands up. Yeah, and it actually, to be honest, Alice, a lot of the work that we did was really helpful with that. So it was me sort of like
Okay,
passing on
yeah.
my understanding of how you coach to help someone who was much younger.
Oh,
Yeah.
full circle moment. Do you think you would ever do anything more with that side of
With
things,
the
or does that feel
coaching.
like it?
No, I think it's a great
Yeah.
thing to volunteer alongside, and I think it's something that you can do quite easily alongside a job. So yeah, I think it's
Mm.
something I'll continue with, but not make a career out of it.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's great when people acknowledge that they enjoy something like that, but that it doesn't have to become like their whole career. I think sometimes we forget that we've got various different parts of our lives that we can feel fulfilled in, and it doesn't always have to be that that becomes like your profession
Mm,
and the whole thing. It can just be kept as a sort of hobby almost. But yeah, as I say, get a lot of purpose and meaning from it. Um, so you've been in your current role
yeah,
3 years,
yeah, three
yeah.
years.
And you're on maternity leave at the moment. So becoming a parent, a whole different
Wild.
thing, right?
I'm definitely
Wild
glad the first few
indeed.
months are over.
Yeah, gosh, it's like, oh, it's so hard to describe, isn't
Yeah,
it?
and also hard to remember. I've got
Um,
friends now who are having babies saying, "What did you do at this month, at this time?" And I'm thinking, "Oh, I honestly don't know. I couldn't tell you." Just getting through
yeah,
it.
because I remember my mum could never remember like when I learnt to walk and all
Yeah,
this, and when it was happening, I was thinking, oh, how's that possible?
yeah.
But now my son's 8, and if he asks, oh, when did I start to? I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't
All they
know.
remember with rose
Oh,
tinted glasses, my mum was like, "Oh, you were sleeping through the night at 8 weeks old," but her definition of sleeping through the night was 11 till sort of 7. I was like, It's not really sleeping through the night for me." And apparently, we're doing
yeah,
everything very
bit
early,
longer than
but there we go.
Oh. Well, I was just impressed when you said you were going to be able to record this whilst he was napping. I don't think I ever got to that point where
Yeah.
I could be so sure that they would be asleep by a particular time. So yeah, you've obviously done well there for sure. Um, but I mean, going through that experience, has it shifted how you feel about your career in any way,
Yeah, I
or
think
not?
it's I think work-life balance, now is really important for me. Whether it's sort of, I'm in discussion now with them, whether it's I go back sort of 4 days a week or what it looks like as a whole. I'm due to go back in October, and my son's going to nursery in September. So it's quite good. It's always also giving me a month to sort of get my head in gear of, what's coming up and what to do next. And I think also reflecting on some of the work that we did and seeing where my priorities are now. My husband's company has
Mm,
now been set up for 3 years and is going really well. So does that mean, I can have a bit of a gear shift in terms of what I want my day to day to look like, and we can take a few more risks. So I think, yeah, I don't think any role that you choose, be it the next role, has to always be the perfect role. And I think that's something that I'm sort of beginning to learn, and particularly in today when businesses have challenges. People really want their wellness and health to be looked after. National insurance is at a all time high. There's so many things that businesses are struggling with. AI coming into the fold, that I think it's hard to look after people for 20 odd years like our parents sort of did careers for. And I think it's almost an opportunity, and particularly me being on maternity leave and hopefully having more children, to think about what the next career decision looks like. And is it that I stay with what I'm doing? Is it a career pivot or shift? And having the confidence to take charge of my own future, really.
mm. And what are you thinking sounds like an
Yeah.
attractive next step for you
Yeah, I'm
right
sort of,
now?
I think I'm doing the exercise to sort of go, almost look at it backwards. What am I wanting out of my life? Ideally, what salary do I want to be on? How many days a week do I want to be working? And sort of drawing it back from that way. Obviously still having conversations with people internally in the business and also externally, and keeping sort of options open. I think always going for coffees with people is so helpful. Even in my role at the moment, I've
Mm.
got people messaging me on LinkedIn saying, "Can we have a virtual catch up?" And I've never met them in my life, but we end up jumping on a call and I talk about what I do in that business. So I think doing more of that and really understanding what opportunities are out there, and looking back at what priorities, values, and purpose, like we did on that star exercise.
Yeah. Well, it's good to hear that you're still uh, using that content, still using the tools to, yeah, see where you're at today. Because, yeah, I think something like having kids and, being in that role a few years, yeah, it gets to a point where you kind of start reassessing maybe what might be next.
I think also just
Um,
on that with just like simple things like nursery fees, obviously all of that I've now got to fit into my financials, and you've got to make it worthwhile to get out of bed and go to work every day to pay to pay for that and actually not be with your child every day. So I think that is a dilemma that so many women and men are having. Childcare is really challenging actually. So you really have to either be, passionate about what you're doing in your career to leave your child every day, or it's got to really financially, pay for it. So that's something that we're discussing at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and I mean, just the idea of leaving them, I suppose, almost regardless of the cost, it's a long time to be away
Mm,
from them, and you kind of want it to be, as you say, something that you're at least interested in or passionate about, so that it makes that experience worth it. I
yeah,
suppose I just don't know how people do it. Going to a job that they don't like, and they're leaving their kids, and as you say, and then it's really expensive, and
yeah,
yeah, it's really tough.
yeah,
So yeah, better that you're doing something you enjoy, that's for sure.
absolutely.
um and do you think in time you might revisit having your own thing then, of some sort,
Yeah,
in
I
years to
definitely,
come?
I definitely like to think in the future. I mean, when I'm thinking, where ahead once sort of the family children eras are sort of over and our family sort of grown up and going to universities, I sort of think, what would I like to be doing in that time? And I think the ideal would be to have my own thing, and to have,
Mm.
flexibility over what I'm doing on a day to day. Rather than, yeah, I guess necessarily working for someone else and on their sort of time schedule.
Mm. Yeah, so then it becomes about timing more than anything, doesn't
It
it?
does,
Seems
and
like
I
that's
think,
been a
yeah,
key factor.
you always have to factor those elements in, and it's yeah, it can be a challenge, particularly for the woman who's taking time out of their career to have kids, to raise a family. You really, it's tough. You either have to do lateral moves, you've really got to fight to hold your position and get those internal promotions, if you've taken years out of work.
Mm. Well, it sounds like where you are now have been quite supportive, and it's great that they're even already talking to you about your options when you come back,
Yeah,
and
absolutely. And I mean,
it
they were
sounds like
amazing.
you're
And when I went on
loving.
maternity leave, I actually, the week I went into labour, they gave me an internal promotion. So, it was a good week, and they didn't have to do that. I was then away for a year. What was the benefit of them necessarily doing that, apart from, I guess trying to, keep internal staff. So that was really positive for them to do. And then,
Hmm.
having been there for 2 years, I've also got the enhanced maternity leave pay, which is great.
Okay. Well, yeah, and I imagine that must have been on your mind when you were previously thinking about starting your own thing, because obviously maternity pays, well, the statutory one isn't great.
Mm. Yeah,
Um,
it's
so I imagine that might have been on your mind a bit too.
100%. I think when I started doing some of the samples, for the jumpsuit business, I then found out I was pregnant. So I thought, actually, this is this is going to be a bit of a challenge to continue getting these samples to fit me. So yeah, that did go on a a bit of a back burner whilst, other priorities sort of took place.
Yeah. Well, it's tough because, yeah, it's sort of balancing if you want to start your own thing, but it's so attractive to be employed because of the benefits and, yeah, the support and everything. So yeah, it's tough decisions, that's for sure. Um, okay, so looking back over the transitions that you've made, and the decisions that you've made, what would you say have been some of the sort of highlights for you?
I think highlights, in terms of the sort of role that I'm in now, from moving from the
All
previous role.
Yeah, all of it really. Just when you think back to how you felt when we started working together, and that journey that you went on, and obviously we're about to go down one road and shifted slightly. Yeah, I just wondered in hindsight what you see as the sort of highlights, or the peak moments in all of that?
Yeah, I think the renewed confidence it actually gave me in making that shift into a slightly smaller business, but a business that was growing. I sort of done many more things in the sort of 3 years, 2 years that I've been there than I did, I guess, in the 8 years that I did in working for a big corporation within publishing.
Wow.
I've put myself forward for sort of hosting events. I've met some incredible people along the way, some wonderful founders setting up their own businesses. So yeah, I think the confidence is a big piece. And yeah, how my day to day has shifted in comparison to what I was doing when I was working for a large corporation. My days are so much fuller, I guess. There's a lot to cram in. You have to work at a really, fast pace, but the reward is amazing at a startup in terms of seeing the output that such a small team can do, and actually the impact and
Mm,
effect it then has on the people you're sort of supporting. And obviously, in this example, it's women in the workplace.
yeah. Well, it sounds like, yeah, it ticks a lot of those key boxes that you had.
Yeah.
And it seems like it's quite well aligned in that respect. And having to navigate all of that and taking on new challenges and having to make tough decisions, what's perhaps been the hardest part or the hardest
What's
bits?
been the hardest part? I'd say always getting started, to be honest. With these things. I think it's so easy when you're not particularly happy in a role to sort of sit there and just get through the day to day, look forward to the weekend and sort of drift a little bit. And then, as I've mentioned on LinkedIn, to go on LinkedIn and just see an easy lateral move you could do and take that and then still be quite, dissatisfied with your job. So I think the getting started with all these things is really, really tricky. And I think that's when, you and me started working together. That was one of the exercises that you actually got me to do is one, you get out your comfort zone, speak to people, about, ask them what your qualities are, what you're good at. So then that sort of then indirectly sort of builds up your confidence, reaffirms actually you can do those certain things in your job, and actually sometimes highlights elements that you didn't think you were good at, but perhaps someone else thinks you're amazing at. So I think yeah, some of the work that we did to just take action, really, speak to people.
Hmm.
I guess in my career so far, I've done sort of external courses and training to see, oh, is that the avenue I want to go down? Just to understand a bit more about what other industries offer. Um, but yeah, I think as long as you're sort of getting started and taking action, so many opportunities can really come from that, and to not be afraid of speaking to complete strangers and asking them for a coffee or more details about what their industry entails.
Yeah, it can be really helpful and it just gets you going. As you say, that's often that's often the hardest part. We have all these aspirations, but it's so easy just to stay in your comfort zone, just take the easy next step. It's quite hard to sort of actually push yourself out of that comfort zone, see what else
Yeah,
exists.
absolutely. I actually follow this
That sounds
ultra marathon runner, and she always says forwards as a pace, which I kind of love because it sort of makes
oh, that's a
everything
good one.
seem much less daunting. Just take action, and you'll get somewhere. So
Yeah,
not to be afraid to do that, really.
yeah, for sure. Um, okay, and do you think there are any particular resources or avenues that you've gone down that have been particularly helpful for you
Yeah, I
figuring
think,
out
I mean,
next
obviously,
steps?
podcasts like this is great to get an idea of what other people do in their careers and understand the shifts they've made. Squiggly Careers, I don't know if you're familiar with that one, with
Yeah,
Sarah
yeah, they're
Ellis and
great.
Helen Tupper. That's also a good one. They sort of do various exercises and interview various thought leaders in sectors. Um, Coaching, obviously working with people like yourselves to do that self
Hmm.
reflection. I think it's really helpful to have someone guiding you to do that. and to really interrogate, you further. Because I think sometimes you can kind of convince yourself you're doing the right thing, but actually when someone's asking you those sort of very um, direct questions, it really makes you stop and assess the situation and where you're at and what you really want from your career. Speaking to people again, asking for feedback. What are your qualities? What do they think you're good at? That really helps just to build your confidence and actually have an outside perspective. And as I've said, some of the answers are different to what you perhaps think you're good at. So that's been really helpful for me. And I guess some of the simple exercises that you have obviously helped me with, Alice, the sort of star and, what do you want people to say at your funeral, things like that.
That's so funny that that's the one that stuck with you
Yeah, I think
after
it's
all
because it's a
these
little bit
years.
morbid. And I was like, God, I've never thought of that.
It focuses the mind, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But I think it comes off the back of, so one version is, imagine it's your 95th birthday party. But then, yeah, sometimes I push it that one step further and say, as you say, yeah, it's a bit morbid, but focuses the mind and gets to the crux of often what's most important for
Yeah,
people.
absolutely.
So yeah, if that's how you remember me
Yeah.
by for years to come,
Well, I just think it's something
that'll
you'd
be
never
that
stop to think
one.
about. But then actually, when you do, it really makes you reflect on your whole life.
Yeah. Well, maybe you can use it to help you decide what your next
Yeah,
step
let's say
is.
95th birthday
What
party.
that's
That's
going to
probably a bit
be.
more optimistic.
Yeah, it's a bit more upbeat, isn't it? Okay. Yeah. And anything else that's helped you along the way?
um, no, I think just keeping open-minded and
Oh,
speaking,
amazing.
also keeping in contact with people you've worked with, even if you haven't particularly enjoyed the company you're at the time, you never know where it's going to lead. I guess in my experience,
Yeah.
the CEO of the first company I ever worked for has now set up the business I work for now. So it's come, full circle. So
Mm.
yeah, don't close any doors on people because you really don't know where anyone else is going to end up and whether they can, help you with your career move in the future.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. No burning bridges.
No.
You never know how helpful they might be. Okay. Well, I'm very impressed that your son has slept all the way through this on schedule. And it's been so lovely to talk to you and hear where you're at. And yeah, it sounds like you're probably just about to embark on maybe the next chapter and see what's next for yourself. Do you think there's anything else you wanted to cover or mention?
No, I think just, yeah, thank you very much for having me on and look forward to reviewing some of the
Oh,
exercises that we did to see what my next move's going to be.
yeah. Well, no, that's good. As I say, that's what it's all about. It's not just a sort of one-off process, really. It's there to support you throughout your whole career. So good to hear that it might be useful for this next step. But yeah, thanks again, Hannah. Lovely to talk to you, and hopefully speak to you soon.
Thanks, Alice.
All right, take
Bye
care.
bye.
Bye.